scary stories. This story takes place during the summer of 2015. So quite a while ago, while I'm on my shift as an overnight security guard for a small business which I no longer work for. Basically, what I did was drive around an area of about 10 miles to several different businesses that hired us to do patrols, maintenance, alarm checks, and all that good stuff, depending on the wants and needs of each individual business. The job paid decently, and I didn't have to deal with supervisors and other coworkers, so it was a great alone time to look forward to. The first business I would go to that specific night is located in a somewhat remote location just outside of town. Behind it, about 200 feet or so, are some tracks, and across them is a very small hill that leads up to a small residential area. This specific business didn't ask for much other than alarm checks and its doors, so I was never there that long. I was about finished up there that night when I noticed a young man walking up towards the train tracks. Thinking nothing of it, I finished up what I was doing and got back inside my vehicle to do one more drive around before heading home. As I was about to leave, I looked out of my passenger side window and saw that guy was still walking up towards the train tracks. But this time, curious, I decided to drive up towards him and see what he was up to. I watched him walk for a few seconds when he suddenly stopped. At this point, I didn't know what to think. Maybe he was taking a break. Maybe he dropped something. I don't know. It wasn't until he decided to move for about a minute then I began to think something wasn't right. I hurried up and drove over to see what he was doing. Once I was about 50 feet or so away from the tracks, I got out of my vehicle and yelled at him to see if he was all right, but he didn't respond. He just stood there looking down at the tracks. A few seconds later, he suddenly turned around and looked at me. I continued to stand there and yell at him, but he didn't respond. I then put two and two together and was worried that he may be suicidal. I yelled at him again, and he finally answered me. In a low, monotonous voice, he said he was okay. It was then, on instinct, I decided I had to reach out for help. I asked if he wanted help, but he refused, saying that no one could help him. I walked away from him, got out my phone, and dialed 911. I had just got done talking to the dispatcher, who told me that they would send someone out to my location when I turned around to see the guy slowly walking towards me now. I watched as he reached into his pocket and slowly revealed a pocket knife, and after a couple of seconds, he flipped out the blade. At this time, I had no training for dealing with suicidal people, nor have I had any self-defense training, so I didn't know exactly how to respond, but I decided to take a passive approach. As he got closer, his expression didn't change, nor his walk speed. He looked like a robot walking towards me. I backed away a bit and tried to talk to him. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't respond, not even moving a single muscle in his face, remaining calm. I then asked why he wanted to kill himself and if I could help. He finally spoke and said no, and once again stated that no one could help him in the same low, monotonous voice from before. He then said that he just wanted to die and didn't want anyone to get in his way, not even me. After a few seconds of him walking and me backing up, he stopped, looked in the distance to my right, then back at me before turning around and walking back towards the train tracks, this time at a faster pace. I turned to where he was looking and I saw a car in the distance driving towards our location. As it got nearer, I saw the lights on the top of it. It was a cop, finally. I looked towards the train tracks and saw the guy walking across them. I pointed in his direction at the cop who was now very close to me, who drove past me and up towards the tracks. I watched as he got out of his car, shined his flashlight towards the tracks, and began to jog up to them while yelling at who I assume was the guy while the other officer got out and signaled for me to come up to her. I told her that I was a security guard and was on patrol when I encountered him, and about how he was suicidal and that he was armed with a knife, and at one point approached me with unknown intent. She wrote all this down and spoke over her radio the details I gave. After a couple of minutes, we both watched as the male cop came back across the tracks, but this time not alone. The young man was with him, being led towards us, but now he was handcuffed and still had a non-existent expression on his face, as if nothing was happening. After he was placed in the back seat of the cruiser, not looking at me a single time, the officers and I talked about what happened, and they told me that he would be placed under a psychiatric hold and thanked me for reaching out to them before finally leaving. Once they were gone and out of sight, I gave a strong exhale and began to walk back to my vehicle, all the while feeling relieved that not only I was all right, but the young man was as well, and hopefully is doing a lot better now. I hope we don't meet again under the same circumstances. The year was 1995, and I was 16 years old. I lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a middle-class suburban community with my mother, 2 younger brothers, and our 140-pound Doberman Pinscher. His name was Turbo. From the front door of our house, you could see directly into our living room, which had an open-concept floor plan with the kitchen and dining room. Our couch was on the wall directly in front of the front door. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior years in high school. My brothers and I spent a decent amount of time outdoors because this was back when people still did that. I suppose anyone paying attention knew who lived in our house, and I suppose they knew that the only adult was gone when the only car was gone. However, prior to the man showing up at the house, I'd never noticed anything off, and I never noticed anything afterward, so maybe we were just a random target. It was Saturday, and my mom and the boys had run to the grocery store. In Nevada in the 90s, almost no one had air conditioning. So to cool off, you had to open all the windows and doors and use fans. On this particular day, I had the backsliding door and the front door wide open to get a cross breeze. Neither screen door was locked. I was napping on the couch in full view of the front door in shorts and a tank top. It's good we gain intelligence with age. In my defense, there was 140 pounds of protective dog muscle on the floor next to me, and probably the only reason I am alive. Around the approximate time I expected my family home from the store, Turbo began barking. Assuming he was barking their arrival, I told him to shush and tried to go back to sleep. Turbo, God bless his sweet protective soul, continued to bark, becoming more and more intense and even aggressive with his barking. Finally, after 5 to 10 minutes of Turbo refusing to be quiet and my family never coming in from the car, I sat up, realizing something was wrong. A man who I didn't know stood, seemingly frozen, staring at my frenzied and barking Doberman. Assuming that the man had some appropriate business at my home, I hurried the 10 steps to unlock the screen door, constantly shushing Turbo. I apologized for my dog and for not hearing his knock. He never knocked. The man explained that he was from the phone company and he was here to check our lines. He never took his eyes off Turbo. Turbo never stopped snarling. I leaned forward far enough to see the street. Only unmarked, privately owned cars lined the street. I looked at the man who was dressed in tennis shoes, jeans, and a t-shirt. I was 16 and dumb enough to nap in front of an unlocked door. But I was no fool. Phone company personnel always wear uniforms, always drive company vehicles, and don't come without being called, and don't work weekends. I looked at the man who had yet to look up from the 140-pound dog that was now foaming at the mouth. I grabbed the screen door handle and held it. This got his attention. Our eyes met as I said, "You have 30 seconds to show me identification, or I will open this door." I don't even think he made an incoherent excuse as he ran away. I fell to my knees and hugged Turbo. I then gave him all the meat in the refrigerator. I believe with absolute certainty that I would have been attacked if we had not had him. I like to think that if I hadn't had a huge, overly protective dog, I would have been in the habit of locking doors. But what would a screen door latch do against an intruder? And that creep stood there and watched me for 5 to 10 minutes. Perhaps he was paralyzed in fear, but maybe he was working his angles, and only Turbo's insistent display of his willingness to kill anyone who threatens me. That's my theory. Turbo has long passed, but his legacy lives on. And now 2 loving, loyal, and lethal dogs sleep in my room every night. It was around 12:30 a.m., and my dance show had just finished. My mom couldn't get near the theater I was performing at due to traffic, and said I would have to just walk across town to the car where she would be waiting for me. Now, if this was my hometown, it would have been fine, except the show was in a new town where I had never been before, so I know I would have to ask for directions. I picked up my suit bag, which contained all my costumes from the night, and a courier bag containing 6 bottles of water, and went on my way. I crossed the road to the train station opposite and noticed a tall man around 6'7". He was about 60 and wore a long brown trench coat. He had a hat on, and he was smoking a cigarette. Everyone else around me was drunk, so I thought however creepy this guy is the only one capable of giving me correct directions. I approached the man, where he greeted me with a creepy grin. I asked him for directions to the museum, and he told me it's just at the top of the road and I should see it. The road was long, and I knew it would take me some time to get to the top, but if the traffic's bad, what could I do? I walked a little further up the road where I noticed the same man standing outside some Irish bar. He approached me and asked if I'd like to go to a special place with him. Me being a 15-year-old socially awkward teen, just looked at him and smiled as if he was joking, and I tried to carry on walking. This is where it gets creepy. I had a top on that I had worn for the final of the show. On the back of the top was 96. It was a tribute to the 96 lives that were taken in a tragic accident. As I tried to walk away, he grabbed me by this top and pulled me back. He started stroking the back of my top and whispering down my ear, 96, 96, 96. I broke free of his grasp and ran like an Olympian up the road. I was freaked out by the occurrence, but figured the man had gotten drunk in the time it had taken me to walk up the road. I finally reached the top, but could still not see the museum. I stopped a hen party and asked them for directions. They told me it was just through the alley and on the left. I looked at the alley. It was shady and tight. The only source of light was coming from a Chinese shop selling herbs and spices in the center. I walked slowly down the alley when my bag containing my water spilt, and all my water bottles fell all over the street. I started picking them up when I heard the chime of the shop door behind me. I turned, and it was none other than the same damn man. I froze with fear. My mind was saying, "Get the fuck out of here," but my body was frozen. He started walking towards me and whispering in a sinister voice, 96. He repeated, and each time it got louder. Finally, my body went into flight mode, and I ran for my life. He was screaming 96 at the top of his lungs, but I was glad I managed to escape him. I left the alley and came out onto a main road. I finally felt safe. Surely, if he was following me, someone in a car would see. I was texting my friend when I heard a loud shout behind me. I knew instantly who it was. Can this fucker teleport or some shit? I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to be buried in my own suit bag, so again I ran like hell. and for the first time, he started chasing me. All of a sudden, my mom burst around the corner. "For shit's sake, Laura, I was waiting for you half an hour, and I had to walk up and get you? Get in the car, it's 1 a.m. I turned around and the man had changed to the opposite direction. I don't know what his plans were, or what his special place was. I'm just so glad I didn't have to find out. I told my mother about the strange man, but she just said he was probably going the same way as me and was shouting because he was drunk. She told me I was overthinking the whole thing, but it sure didn't feel that way."